You expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Do You Expect Us to Talk? A new podcast about the James Bond movies in the run-up to the 24th film, Spectre. My name is Becca, and I'll be your host, and with me are two massive aficionados of 007, Chris and Dave. Say hi, introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Chris.
Hello, I'm Dave, and of course it is Bond 24, but as we'll get to, we will be covering 25.
Yeah, very exciting.
I mean, should we cover the Casino Royale, the comedy 60s thing as well, or should we just ignore that ever happened?
Oh God, no, because I have you guys both seen it?
I have, I've got it.
Do you really want to sit through it again? If we're honest,
But then if we include Never Say Never Again, I think we should include.
Yeah, but Never Say Never Again is at least trying to be a Bond film. Casino Royale went through like 5 different directors.
It's so bad, it's bad. Oh.
I remember,
I
remember liking it on some level because it's just so random, and it. I think there's some jokes that are funny, but I think when you put it in context of like the Bond series, which it clearly is anyway, but it just comes to us. It's just all over the place. But
no, Woody Allen's hilarious in it though. I think he's the best thing in it.
Woody Allen.
Yeah,
oh yeah,
even though I mean,
it's got a wonderful score. It's got a Burt Bacharach score, which I really, really like. But when you say random, that is its history. It went through 5 directors. Different people made different bits of it, and then they stitched it together. But to be honest, I mean, I don't know what you think, Becca, but I think that people will watch along some of the films with us. I'm not sure I want to put anyone through Casino Royale of 1967. Never Say Never Again. I'll apologise in advance, but at least it's somewhat like Thunderball.
I like Never Say Never Again.
We'll get to it.
I do actually enjoy Never Say Never Again. It's actually not bad despite Connery's hairpiece, but it has some good moments. Has a good villain, but we'll get into that in probably a few months' time.
Okay, to summarise before we move on then.
Yeah, let's just review all the films in the first decade.
Spectre will be the 24th official Eon Productions Bond film. When we get to Thunderball and when we get to Never Say Never Again, we'll explain why there's a Bond film that sits completely outside that canon. And that is Never Say Never Again, so we will be reviewing 25 of them. But Never Say Never Again will come a long way down the line because it's a 1983 film for a series that started in 1962.
I don't count it as a real Bond film.
It's not canon.
No, nor do I. Really.
No, it's not canon.
It is interesting though. I mean, its production and how it came about, and there's also relevance to. I mean, one of the big complaints. We'll get to the various different Bonds in a minute, but one of the complaints is that Roger Moore went on too long. And the biggest reason he went on too long was Never Say Never Again, which he's not in, but we'll get to it.
There you are. That's a reason for you to stay tuned to this podcast, folks.
Healthy debate.
Yes, exactly. So what's the deal, Rebecca? We're gonna go through each film, but starting from Dr. No and move way upwards.
Yep, do it chronologically. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yep. So we're gonna sort of have a retrospective review, just kind of talk about what our feelings are, and
the high points, the low points, what we liked, what we disliked.
Yeah.
Any iconic moments that stand out for us. Aspects that are interesting, like Dave, for example. I know you know a lot about like the financial background of the films and have a lot of insider knowledge.
Well, I wouldn't say it's insider.
Well, not really insider knowledge, but like fan knowledge.
Certainly the Bond films. I mean, when you think they started off being made at the rate of 1 a year, and after 50 years we were up to Bond 23, there have been various long gaps in the series, and we'll talk to them. I think we'll talk about them as we get to the films in question. I mean, certainly when we get to Dr. No next week we will talk about why Doctor No went first. When we get to Thunderball, there is a not a long story, but there's certainly a story around that film and the knock-on effect that had on the franchise. Octopussy and Never Say Never Again in the same year. License to Kill and Goldeneye, bridging an enormous gap.
Yeah, that's interesting to look into.
It's a series that's bridged an awful lot of gaps. Certainly in recent years, certainly post sort of 1989, we've had 2 or 3 gaps in the series of 4 to 6 years. It's a series where the producers and the studios involved have rarely been out of the courts, and also United Artists, who were the company that made and still make the Bond films in a loose way. They're a subsidiary of MGM, and MGM have had an awful lot of financial issues over the years. So there's a lot of stories around the making of the films. Why did we get Timothy Dalton when we did? Why did we get Pierce Brosnan when we did? Why did Roger Moore go on for 10 years? Why is there a series that's right outside continuity with Sean Connery in it? All of those sort of things. Why did Casino Royale, the first book, not get made until 44 years into the series, into the history of the series? We'll get to all
this
of that.
podcast, you're going to learn so much about Bond.
We're not experts. We're not claiming to be experts, but there are some very, very interesting stories that we know between us as we go through the films, and a little bit of context to.
By the end, we might be experts.
Here in Strange Order.
Yeah, I think we probably will.
By the end, we might be.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So yeah, what are you guys' earliest memories of Bond?
Funnily enough, it's hard to think of a definitive memory because I remember watching all the Bond films growing up. So it's firmly cemented to be. It kind of comes it almost comes like a very first memory where it's just kind of very vague and blurred and meshed up. But I suppose the earliest memory is actually Never Say Never Again. But I know for a fact that's probably not the first Bond film I've seen. I've actually watched as a kid because but I do. But as far back, the earliest one I can think of that's definitive is sitting in front of the telly in the living room, watching that fight over the water and the 2 side cliffs. That's kind of an indoor with people with flamethrowers and grenades and Uzis and shit. So that was a definitive memory. But I remember just very kind of growing up. I mean, hell, I remember thinking of View to Kill was quite a new modern one.
Yeah.
That was quite oh my god, this is a new one coming out on telly, even though it's at the time I was 5 years old, and I wasn't even aware of Living Daylights. But and I remember seeing trailers for License to Kill, which seemed oh my god, there's a new Bond. Oh my god, this looks interesting. Oh, wow. And then I heard nothing about that since. And then I remember sort of being surprised there was Living Daylights. So I was like, oh shit, that's. But
there are more of these films. I must discover them.
Well, yeah, but this is my childhood growing up. So,
Chris, what was your talking about memories? It's obviously a little bit vague. Do you remember what your first one theatrically was?
Oh, the fact was Goldeneye, because I was way too young to remember watching.
It would have to be, because License to Kill was a 15 in the UK.
It definitely. It came out the same year as Batman. That was a 15 at the time, wasn't it?
Batman was a 12.
Was it a 12?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Batman was one of the first 12s.
Yes, but there was a 15 on video because I hadn't had a 12. Yes, that's.
They didn't have a 12 rating for years on video. Yeah.
Yeah. Watered down.
Yeah. So I was but. Yeah, I must have been 7 or 8 at the time, and so my cinema going antics wasn't quite up to scratch. It was still very vague, wasn't as regular as I would have liked them to be, but it was more of a treat every so often. So, but I remember there just being thinking growing up for school, it just seemed forever ago. Why aren't they making a Bond film? Why is no Bond films anymore? I'd love to see a Bond film. Then when GoldenEye was announced, I was like, yes, Bond is back. So it's very exciting to actually see a James Bond film and a new Bond back. But
I can't wait to. I can't wait until we get to GoldenEye because it's long been. Well, I wouldn't even say it's a theory, but I certainly think GoldenEye is hands down the most important film in the series after the first couple. Once that series was up and running and it kind of had its formula sorted, GoldenEye was just huge for the series. For reasons we'll get to when we get there, but it's when it was made, who it was made with, sort of budget it was made with, how long a gap there'd been, the relative performance of the Bond films over the previous few years. Can't wait to get to GoldenEye, and certainly a lot of, if we're loosely the same generation, I mean across the three of us, I think there's about 8 years between us, but we're all loosely the same generation, and GoldenEye is quite an important Bond film to our generation.
yeah, I think so. I think because it's like a new branding of the modern Bond as well. It kind of like tailed off after Dalton, and then it was almost like a rebranding as like at what Craig. It was essentially the same thing that Craig did. It was like a new branding of different of a new James Bond.
Definitely. So,
But I can totally see why GoldenEye is important. Bond because
had we not had GoldenEye, then we wouldn't have had.
Well, basically, if GoldenEye flopped, then that would have been it.
That would have been the end of the franchise.
Exactly. There would have been.
It certainly would have been it for at least another 10 years.
Oh,
I can't believe, with a property like Bond and the appetite there is now for, I hate the term reboot, but reboot and trying again and everything else, I don't think Bond would have gone away forever.
No.
It wouldn't have been viable for a very, very long time. And when we get to Brosnan, I will be relatively kind about him, but I think I'll be making a lot of arguments that he was a very, very safety first choice. And that is very relevant. That's very much what the series needed back then. But certainly his era was very much a...
He kissed a lot of dead women in that series. I don't know if you ever noticed that about Pierce Brosnan. He did kiss a lot of dead women.
It's a horrible thing to say.
Well, it's true. I mean, he does it at least twice in his 4 films he did.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
That's
We'll get to that. But certainly GoldenEye. So basically, Chris, your first theatrical was GoldenEye.
Yeah.
And you'd have been about 12 at that point?
Probably 12, 13, yeah.
13?
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Well, in my case, my first theatrical was A View to a Kill. I'm about 6 years old. I'm about 6 years old.
So cool.
Well, my first Bond experience, full stop, was Christmas 1984. I went off to... my family went to the Midlands for Christmas. My uncle lived up there at the time. And I don't know if it was Christmas Day, Boxing Day, Christmas Eve, or whatever it was, but around the Christmas period, the big film on, well, it had to be ITV because ITV have had the Bond films forever, was The Man with the Golden Gun. And at the same time, the BBC was showing Mary Poppins. And of course, I'd never heard of the Bond films. I'm 8 years old and I'd seen Mary Poppins in the cinema. So I was totally, I want to watch Mary Poppins. But it was a very male household I was sat in. And they were totally sod that we're watching this. And they stuck The Man with the Golden Gun on. And so, yeah, at 8 years old, it took me till 8 years old to watch my first Bond film. And I remember being blown away by it, largely more by Christopher Lee than by Roger Moore. We'll get to Roger Moore with me a bit later on.
Sorry, I had to laugh at that.
Sorry?
So you said we'll get to Roger Moore with me later on. Sorry, I had to laugh.
Roger Moore.
I just thought that.
Raise an eyebrow there.
Let's try that again. It's all right. I can edit it. It's not a problem.
No, I'm keeping that in.
No, you fucking ain't.
It's too good not to, mate.
Perhaps not all of us want Roger Moore with you, sorry.
Hang on a minute. So I'd said Christmas 84 and I'd said thing, and I said... So yeah, my first experience of seeing James Bond, basically I was more taken with Scaramanga than I was Bond. And I think at that point I expected every Bond film to be like that. I expected every Bond film to be a personal vendetta against someone who was like a dark version of him. But I saw that film, really, really liked it. Roger Moore was James Bond to me. I wasn't aware there'd been any others. And then I remember watching a couple more. I can't remember which ones. Might have been The Spy Who Loved Me, something like that. Definitely Roger Moore Bond films. And then A View to a Kill was released the following summer. And it was back in that era where they kind of made a little bit more effort around the theatrical experience. And it was only little things, but I remember like turning up and there were huge cardboard cutouts of Grace Jones and Roger Moore, and in the screen there were as well. And it was a huge event. And at that age, I loved it. So Roger Moore was very much my Bond. And then we'll get on to Bonds a bit later in terms of, what we think of the individual Bonds. But I remember Mum saying I prefer Sean Connery, and I was, who on earth is that?
Yeah.
And she showed me from
a
Russia with Love, and that kind of changed everything.
There was a weird kind of like a period in my childhood where like Roger Moore and Sean Connery were basically the same person. It was like a weird, I didn't quite connect the dots. Like, oh, different actors, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
well, of course,
I would have been
the
very
first
young
Connery
there.
I saw. The first Connery I saw was like From Russia with Love, and of course, that's probably the most serious and earnest Connery. So I've gone from late era Roger Moore, where they're basically parody comedies, stroke comedies anyway, and I've gone to like From Russia with Love, where this young, physically fit guy who looks like he could kill you does a really a really sort of serious, straight story, and I was like, oh, that's James Bond, and it kind of changed everything.
So
from that point on, you were a fan.
So Rebecca, what's your Bond memories and first theatrical experience?
It's a little bit hazy. I kind of think I might have been a little bit too young for GoldenEye when it came out in the cinema. So, but I seem to remember going to see Tomorrow Never Dies. I suspect that might have been my first Bond experience in the cinema.
I remember watching that and with my dad and having an absolute blast. Because it was like obviously around Christmas time, and we got like our Christmas trees and decorated, and we were like, go to cinema and watch a new Bond film. I just remember enjoying the shit out of it. So
yeah, it's a really good event. I think when it changed from being a summer release to a winter release, it makes it all look more special because you can celebrate that with your family and your friends. It just makes it a real event. But yeah, I think as far as my maybe kind of first introduction to Bond, I think my dad might have had a hand in it somehow. I suspect probably the same, like watching Bond movie on a bank holiday, sort of wet dreary bank holiday Monday maybe, and I think Spy Love Me came on, and I was like, oh, what is this heady mix of action, adventure, excitement, and some guy named Roger Moore in it? And yeah, from that point I was hooked.
I'm kind of tempted. I'm kind of tempted to rock an Alan Partridge like thing where like everyone do that, but
oh, that's true. Yeah.
Everyone do this with your hands.
with in black jumpsuits with lemon piping.
Lemon piping. But yeah, I mean, I was of the era that Roger Moore was James Bond. I didn't know there was another guy, and you wouldn't think of it. You don't watch a film in that era and say who played him before. You wouldn't know any difference. So
no, you focus on that.
They were basically vaguely comedic films with a reasonable amount of action in them, but they went all over the world, and I mean they were great. I mean my opinion of Roger Moore may have changed over the years, but I can still see that bit of the Bond DNA that sort of drew me in.
Yeah, you can see it running in the thread all the way through the films, can't you? So
definitely. So what's everyone's favourite Bond then?
That's a big question.
Or is this like, I mean, who's your favourite actor to play Bond? This might be an obvious question, but
this is quite a big question. I read an interview with Mark O'Connell recently, and I think his answer was like whoever we've got now. I kind of agree with him a little bit. Obviously, like I grew up with Pierce Brosnan. I didn't actually grow up with him, but that would have been very strange.
Yeah, Mark O'Connell's favourite Bond film was A View to a Kill.
Yeah, I don't.
Anyway, at the risk of sounding really dumb,
of it, isn't he? He loves it, which is really cool.
At the risk of sounding really stupid, who's Mark O'Connell?
Mark O'Connell is a super Bond fan, basically, whose father, as I recall, was Cubbly Broccoli's chauffeur.
Yeah, that was it.
Mark, if you do end up like listening to this, because I think you follow me, at least. Do correct us via email. We'll give you the address at the end. But as I recall, his father was a chauffeur for Cubby Broccoli, so he sort of grew up around the films, and he just talks about his life as a Bond fan. And the book's called Catching Bullets. But I do remember he has appeared on James Bond Radio, which is another excellent James Bond podcast. And I do remember him describing A View to a Kill as his favourite Bond film.
Is there a reason why View to Kill is his favourite Bond film? Because, I mean, I will say this for View to Kill, it probably has one of the best Barry scores, I think.
It's a lovely score. Really atmospheric.
Yeah, I just wish it was in a better film, but...
Well, I mean, we'll get to Spectre in a minute, but when you listen to the current Spectre trailer, there's a sting from On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You have to discuss
and there's
that in a
no
minute.
doubt, in my mind, and people may disagree, but when I pick John Barry's best scores for Bond, they're literally 3 of them in a row. And it's You Only Live Twice,
Yeah.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Diamonds Are Forever.
I agree with you
Whatever you
there,
think of the respective films, I think that's his golden era. And in that period, I believe, I don't know for certain without looking him up, but I was having this conversation with someone last night. I don't know if he won the Oscar for it, but he scored Midnight Cowboy in that period as well, which I think he won an Oscar for.
He was on a roll.
So I think you're looking at John Barry's peak as a score writer in that time. But I mean, certainly, I don't know that he did a bad score at all.
Anyway, just to bring it back to, yes, favourite Bonds. But no, also growing up with Pierce Brosnan as the Bond, I would have to say Brosnan.
Ooh.
What about you guys?
I'll let you go first, Chris.
Well, part of me wants to go classic, which is obviously Connery. But my heart is in the camp of Dalton. I think he's even to this day kind of like unfair. Yeah, there's kind of a sense of injustice for Dalton, I feel, and I look at the 2 films that he's done, and he is Bond to me. I think he is like the perfect Bond. And he wasn't. I want more. I wanted more. I would have happily had another 2 or 3 films from Dalton, even though no one else wanted them at the time. But to me, he just establishes what that character is for me personally, and he kind of like has, in between those 2 films, he kind of does it justice. And he gets it right on all areas. So Dalton for me.
For me, I think it depends on mood to a degree. The knee-jerk reaction is Connery. I think he had a very erratic era. I do think his first 4 films are gold, and I think they're one of the 2 golden ages of Bond, which I'll warm to that theme a bit later on. But for me, Bond has had 2 golden ages, and those first 4 films, and Majesty's as well, I suppose, was it.
Special mention.
But the 60s. The problem with Connery is he lost interest. I mean, you get to You Only Live Twice, and he's a little out of shape.
He starts throwing it in a little bit there, isn't he?
Yeah, and then you get to Diamonds Are Forever, and suddenly at 42, he looks like an old man.
He's doing it for the money, and you can see it in his eyes.
And it's not a very good film as well, which doesn't help, but purely on his performance, he's all over the shop. The next name that springs to mind is always Daniel Craig, but I'm very, very reluctant to put the current Bond top, because I think you need a bit of distance from the era you're in. Because I remember through the Brosnan era, he was the best Bond since Connery.
Yeah,
Now we got a bit of distance from it. With no disrespect to your opinion at all, Becca, that's not the majority view now.
No.
I tend to think if he does the next one, the one after, and done, and they're of a similar standard to Skyfall or Casino Royale or somewhere between, I think he'll end up sitting top of the pile for me.
Hopefully,
But
if
not
he carries
there
on that way.
Dalton, for me, and I've never been able to fully explain this opinion. I don't know how to explain it. He's not a big screen actor to me. If you offered me...
No, I get that. He's not, I would sure you say he's not, he's not like, say, Tom Cruise. you know, I mean, it's not like there's actors. There's like proper character actors who like get into like a role and are just kind of like you can tell that they've come from like theatre and they've like proper like not spent their lives in front of a camera.
The closest Bond to him is Craig. Craig is a little bit like a modernised Dalton, but Craig is a movie star. He just is. He's got an awful lot of charisma, and also he can be ugly. He can be good looking. He can turn it on and off, and that's an almost undefinable gift.
He's got that humour side to him as well. He's got a great sense of comedy as well. Whereas with Dalton, you don't. I'm sure you did have that, but you don't get that so much.
On funny lines. There are one or two I liked, but I mean, there's one in particular when we get to his.
Just the cello.
Just this cello.
I guess that's probably not one.
No, that's actually a line I like. No, when it comes to Dalton and funny lines, I mean, there's one or two I actually like, and we'll get to them when we get to the films. But there's one or two where you barely notice it's a funny line, because he doesn't really sell it. If James Bond had ever been a TV series, I'd want Dalton. There's no question that I think
I can see that.
Layers to it. If he could bring layers to it week in and week out, which is funny when you think like Brosnan did Remington Steele, but certainly my object, it would be, I think Dalton would be my favourite if these films weren't projected. There is something about Dalton that gets lost when you put it on the big screen. I think if his era was finished and we had another film or two of a similar standard, I think Craig would be my favourite. But the convoluted answer, I think, is that Connery still sits there, just by nature of the fact that we've had decades with his films. He's part of the golden era of Bond. Bond ruled the world in the 60s. I mean, it really did. It was the Star Wars of its era. But his era did not come to a very satisfying end.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying about Dalton as well. I mean, even for that, I was kind of like, you almost kind of like changing my opinion, or someone's like, oh shit, maybe. No, but I think there is like a sense of I do completely see what you mean about if it was a TV series, and I think that's one of the things why I like about Dalton. I want his character to come up on screen, and and there's matched with the fact that I felt that. I think he had at least another two films in there. I would have liked to have seen, and maybe would have, not been like the most popular at the time, but it may have grown in popularity like as the years went on.
To know his Bond better. Yeah, I don't know if you'd agree with that.
I mean, both films are erratic because they're basically kind of like very toned. Like one film was like a kind of lead on from Roger Moore, which would have been fine. If they carried on that tone, but they want to do something drastically different for the next one, and then that was it. So you had two Bond films, both completely different as well. So you had this like uneven kind of thing to him. So what?
He's just lost potential, and I mean he came to the role at 43 as well, which isn't too old, but
I think the average age is kind of like 40.
But isn't Bond meant to be like 40 though? Isn't he? He's meant to be kind of.
Yeah,
if you look at the books, he's like 35 to 45. And in fact, their mandatory retirement age in the books is 45. Well, given the way people age now compared to the 50s when they were written, you can probably get away with 50. I always think you should cast Bond at around mid to late 30s in order to get a decade or so out of them. I think you'd have struggled with Dalton. I mean, by the time of GoldenEye, he would have been about 51.
He still looks badass now, though. Dalton.
I mean, he does, to be fair. He's aging phenomenally.
You just got to look at Roger Moore in A View to a Kill, There's obviously a younger, fitter man doing the stunts there, so...
We will get on to stunts.
Apologies to Sir Roger, if you're listening.
Well, yeah, Roger, if you are listening, I am, which is just... if you're listening, of course Roger Moore...
Why wouldn't he be?
Why wouldn't he be? He's got nothing else to do. Leave that fourth wife of yours alone and listen to our podcast. No, I tend to think that...
You must have did that per us, but...
Roger Moore is... I'm so glad he was Bond. I just don't like him as Bond. I mean, we get...
He's the fun Bond, though, isn't he? I mean, that's the thing with Roger.
He's the funny one.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people often make the point about the humour in his films, but they're not funny. I mean, you think about, I mean, there's a couple of lines, and again, we'll get to them when the films comes, but there are a couple of Roger Moore lines that are genuinely really, really good. But most of the time, it's things like Octopussy, the Tarzan yell. That's not funny. I mean, Craig in Casino Royale with, that last hand nearly killed me, is funnier than Roger Moore, anything Roger Moore ever did. And yet, Craig is this taciturn, unfunny, serious Bond, and Roger Moore's hilarious. Well, Roger Moore's not hilarious. There's very little about any of his films that are that funny, to be quite honest. They're just in a much, much lighter key. But we will get to Roger Moore. He is, and I'll spoiler alert, he is by far my least favourite James Bond. And I mean over beyond Lazenby, Brosnan, any of them, he is flat bottom. I consider him massively miscast. But I will say some nice things about him when we get there, because he
deserves it.
Didn't they?
Because he proved that there's another interpretation to be done.
Definitely.
Didn't they originally want more at the start?
There's a very
It's on Ivanhoe, wasn't it? I think it was off the back of that. Or wasn't he too young?
Well, it depends.
I guess it was probably off the Saint, really, wasn't it? But maybe
yeah,
the
reason he didn't do it was the Saint. He was locked into the Saint. There's been different.
Was it the Saint or the Persuaders? No, it was the Saint, wasn't
the Saint. The Persuaders is the early 70s.
Yeah, that's the one.
But he was doing the Saint at the time.
Another John Barry.
Originally, I was literally looking at this today. Actually, Harry Saltzman had an option on the films only for about 6 months. He paid about $50,000 for it.
Bargain.
And he needed to. Well, yeah, it was really. But as the rights were about to lapse, he partnered up with Cubby Broccoli, who desperately wanted to do the Bond films. He was a fan of the books. At the same time, the name escapes me now, but a senior producer at United Artists was desperate to do the Bond films. And before he got anywhere near the rights, he spoke to representation of Alfred Hitchcock to see if he could get Alfred Hitchcock involved in doing a Bond film.
That would have been incredible.
Yeah, we'll get to, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll get to a film that's got a very Hitchcockian overtones.
Oh, definitely. I think I know which one we're talking about.
Yes, it's Die Another Day. No.
Oh, yes, that old classic.
Spoiler alert, it's From Russia with Love. Very, very Hitchcock-style film. That never came to anything. Hitchcock said, Hitchcock's people said, you won't get the rights. They're impossible to get.
If not, he probably would have bought up all the books anyway.
Sorry?
If not, he probably would have bought up all the books anyway. Right.
Yeah, so eventually United Artists were approached, I think, or they did approach one of the two, Broccoli and Saltzman. And by then, the whole Hitchcock idea had gone out the window. Although, thinking of Hitchcock, and these two stories often get conflated, they did consider Cary Grant briefly.
Yes, they did.
That was post Hitchcock, but that would have been a one and done if it had been Cary Grant. You got to remember, Cary Grant was born in something like 1904 or 08.
Yeah, he would have been quite old.
He would have been either 54 or 58 by the time the first one would have come out.
But then you do have To Catch a Thief, which is probably his most Bondian movie, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I often think of North by Northwest.
North by Northwest as well. So in terms of like,
yeah. Anyway, I get his birth date and Jimmy Stewart's mixed up. I think he was 1904, so he would have been like 58.
Yeah.
And then they moved on to and it was Harry Saltzman who wanted Roger Moore, but he was tied up with the Saint. And next, it was the fact that Terence Young had already worked with Connery. When they were going through directors, they settled on they talked about several, one of which was Guy Hamilton, who we will get back to because he did 3 Bond films in the event. But when they settled on Terence Young had worked with Connery on a previous film, and the producers had also seen Connery in a film, so he was very much on their radar. So I think Connery was always their sort of. By the time they started seriously casting, it was Connery. But they did talk about a lot of other people first, and Roger Moore was one of them. And I think Roger Moore, around the time of Doctor No, I don't think he would have been better than Connery by any stretch of the imagination. But it was more appropriate then. He'd have been 35.
He's in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, he'd have been the right age, and I think by the time Roger Moore got it, he was almost too old. But yeah, so he was looked at. The Bond series has the Bond producers and the Bond series in general do have a habit of remembering actors. They talked about Roger Moore and ended up casting him 11 years later.
Sure. Well, the same with Brosnan as well. Obviously, he was tied up with Remington Steele, and then a few years later, Timothy Dalton's dropped out.
But Dalton as well. Dalton was looked at around the time of Majesties.
It was. They have a very long memory. Speaking of Majesties, no love for George?
Oh no, George will launch a spirited defence of him in about 6 weeks' time.
Yeah,
yes, I will do the same.
Yeah, I think we all will. I mean, the problem with Lazenby is that he only had the one film, and that was it. And in a sense, probably made the same as Dalton, but Lazenby had one film to go, and it just it's weird because you can only really review Lazenby when you review On Her Majesty's. It's just one of the, it doesn't help the fact that how he was treating the series. Like he was acting like a bit of a and admittedly so he did make a completely wrong decision because he just wanted to now I'm Bond now I can get the fuck out and being a bit rebellious and basically pissing people off.
I don't know what he thought he was going to. Let's go and do something bigger. What was bigger than Bond at the end of the 60s?
No, that was it.
What was he going to do? Join the Beatles? There wasn't anything bigger in the world.
Couldn't really go much. Couldn't go higher from
that.
No,
there wasn't. But I mean, we'll get to the thing about. I mean, I will say up front, it's my favourite film in the entire series. But when we get there's the general perception that it's like one of the best Bond films with the worst Bond actor. And I don't actually agree with that. I think he's perfect for that film. I think there's parts of that film he's genuinely brilliant in, but there's also parts of that film he's actually really bad at, and we'll get there. But it depends what you focus on when you watch it.
I think the problem is like people watch it and think, oh, it's not Connery, and it's just like, oh,
it's
this weird outlier.
Yeah.
But I genuinely love it. We'll get to it, as I say, in about 6 weeks' time.
Yeah. Nice. I do love it.
Connery, sorry, the one thing I will say about Lazenby is what a batting average. One film and it's arguably the best in the series.
It's true.
Well, that's it. I think kind of opinion on it has changed, certainly within like the Bond fandom as well, because it's a real like Marmite movie. There are some Bond fans who are just like, oh, it's terrible, Lazenby was awful, and he did one film, and then the rest of us are kind of like, well, he's actually quite good.
Well, it's like Dalton's like that as well. I mean, I know it wasn't popular at the time, but both his films are actually really, really good. Both are like really good Bond films, in my eyes anyway. But so there is that as well. I don't know if you guys agree. Maybe not.
Yeah, I think we'll come to look at each film and on its own merits. But personally, I think I prefer Living Daylights over License to Kill. But again, that's because I've not seen License to Kill for a few years now. But I'm looking forward to revisiting it again.
The first half of The Living Daylights is amazing. But we'll get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically this podcast is the podcast that we'll get to that. We'll get to it.
We will get to it.
We'll get to it. So
spoiler alert, we'll get to it.
Yeah. So where are we with Bonds then? So your favourite Bond is Brosnan, Becca.
I think I may want to change
Dalton.
that.
Your favourite Bond is Dalton, Chris.
it is.
I would say I'm Connery with huge caveats.
We'll probably change and evolve as we go along.
As we go.
Who knows? Dave might go, I know what my favourite Bond. It's got to be Roger Moore now.
Yeah, you never know. It might happen.
I doubt it, boy.
That nylon safari suit. Get online. Get to the Matalan sale.
Yeah.
See that there's one available.
There's never been a Bond.
Put it on, find I'm catnip to the ladies, and suddenly I'll be forever grateful to Roger.
Dave on an island populated entirely by ladies won't see him till dawn.
There's never been a Bond who wear a safari suit with such casual...
such a degree of casuality.
Yes.
He rocks that safari suit. I must say he does rock the safari suit.
And flares at the time, yeah.
That was the fashion at the
he was
time.
Hang on a minute. So let's actually go through the Bonds then. I mean, at least our preconceptions. I'm not going to say anything about Roger Moore because I just have. So what else? So we'll take them a bit out of sequence. Where are you both on Roger Moore?
I like him. Kind of brings a lot of humour and a bit of stylishness to the role. So
It's like, yeah, I'm kind of with you, but I look at his time as Bond a bit more as more fondly. So it's that kind of thing. It's like I do think, if you're going to look at it as a Bond performance, it's probably like the weakest of the series.
it's quite far removed from the sort of planning idea
and it
of
is,
Bond.
yeah, exactly. So it's from that level, but there is like a certain charm and fun to be had, and and to be fair, Roger, he does have his moments as well. There are particularly he's the one. It might have been the only trick they had, but like whenever like they reference Tracy in the series, it's like little bit of characterization of Bond.
Does genuinely whistle, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You just think,
But I like more when he's a bit kind of rough. I mean, usually he's very much like comes out completely just without scratch and barely scuffled. With the straightening his tie and done. But
He's damaged by the fact he stays in the role too long.
yeah, he should have went.
When we get there are
He should
very
have
solid
went.
reasons
He
that
should have
he's
went
doing it.
Octopussy. That's the time where he should have no. That's it. I'm done.
I'd have-
And it would have been a good one for him to go out as
The
well.
Spy Who Loved Me would have been his last for me.
Oh really?
Yeah, he'd have been.
oh,
I think he was getting too old by The Spy Who Loved Me. But having said that, there is one absolutely cracking entry after that.
Yeah,
Oh.
Goldeneye. I'm kidding.
Yeah, and it's Casino Royale.
wow.
Post The Spy Who Loved Me, he did have a very, very good.
For Your Eyes Only?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I do think Spy Who Loved Me is Roger Moore's best Bond film.
It's the classic Roger Moore one. It's the one that defies Moore as Bond. That's that is his like pinnacle. If you're going to pick
his
one Roger Moore
Goldfinger.
film, it is essentially. It is pretty much like the classic, Roger Moore film. It has everything. Even though it is pretty much like You Only Live Twice in the plot. But
Yeah, it's quite similar.
Yeah.
And they do it again for Moonraker in space.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
how original.
All three of them, Lewis Gilbert.
It's the monorail trilogy.
monorail.
Monorail.
So,
From Ogdenville to North Haverbrook, it's the monorail.
That just reminded me of something we've talked about offline before. When I think of Roger Moore, when you're watching The Simpsons
Oh yeah.
and like somebody says something to Homer and it may be like vaguely intellectual, and Homer looks like he understands, but when it cuts forward to his head, he's thinking about a dancing monkey or
Yeah,
something.
that's the one.
Yeah, whenever I think of Roger Moore's James Bond, in his head at any given point in the series, he's got like a show reel that's a mixture of the Carry On films and hardcore pornography.
Oh god.
That's what's in Roger Moore's Bond's head at all times. Because that's the other thing. I actually find him quite sleazy. I actually find Roger Moore's Bond like you just imagine he just wants to like fuck at every single point.
I think I'm not sure. I wonder if he's like the most like promiscuous as well, because obviously when the 80s came along with Dalton, obviously you had AIDS issue as well in society. So he's probably the most chaste
It's
Bond.
not even the fact he's sleeping around; it's just the fact he's so slimy with it.
I think the
But,
other
I mean, it got a bit silly with Dalton. I mean, with Dalton, it was just like if they could have cut that out of the films entirely, they would have.
you got to have the romance as well, but I think the Dalton films they struck the right balance between like being pervy and actually having a romantic entanglement.
yeah, it was like
I think
he was like the one girl Bond, wasn't he? He was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to be able... And even if like License to Kill, which had 2 girls in it, the whole thing was like kind of... Well, they kind of had the whole thing where he had to choose between the two at the end. Almost, so it was that kind of... That kind of level of like... Yeah, exactly. Rather than just like, oh, shag both and... So...
I actually really want to go and watch Dalton now.
See, my work here is done. I'm kidding.
So hang on. So we've talked about Roger Moore. You're both bigger fans than I am. I've talked about Connery as
Cool.
probably still my favourite. Where are you guys on Connery?
It basically goes like this. Connery's will always be the classic, the quintessential classic. He'll always be that. He's the first one. He started it all. Lazenby will always be the guy who did one, but he's arguably the best film. And more will be like the fun Bond, and I think Dalton will be known as like the unestablished Bond, but the
Serious Bond.
kind of
Tends to be referred to as the literary Bond.
yeah, the kind of like
Mm.
I don't know. It's probably how you feel, what people feel about it, but it's the one that kind of the tail end one, the kind of one that didn't really sort of develop anywhere and kind of went. Some people might look at that as kind of, well, that's because Dalton wasn't any good, or if you're like me, think, well, Dalton really didn't have a chance.
He didn't have a chance. He really didn't.
And then Brosnan would be the kind of reboot Bond, which is kind of weird because that's technically Craig, but Craig is probably the more modern era Bond. I think
modern era.
yeah. I mean, well, at the time, I suppose at the time Brosnan was modern, but
yeah, he was, and I always call Brosnan greatest hits Bond.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because he is. I mean, like or hate Brosnan, he didn't bring a single original thing to the script, to the table at all. In as much as he's just a mix of what came before. And whilst I would watch a Pierce Brosnan film over Roger Moore any day of the week, and I really enjoyed him in the role, Roger Moore took way more chances with the role than Pierce Brosnan ever did.
He was a bit more involved as well when it came to the script, and
I think that says more about
Roger was.
I think that says more about the film, the films that were being developed at the time. Personally,
I think
they could take more risks.
When you look at GoldenEye now, and I can't wait to talk about GoldenEye. And, I apologise in advance to listeners because I'm going to be way harder on it than I think my two co-hosts will be. And it's not to say I don't like it. I think GoldenEye is a very good film, but it's held up to a lot of people as like a top 5 Bond film, and for me, it's nowhere near. It's got an awful lot wrong with it. But the biggest thing wrong with it that I'll never give it a hard time for, because it's not remotely their fault, is it's actually quite cheap. When you look at it now, there's quite a lot of cheap model work and back projection and stuff. And it's simply because Bond had been away for so long that it was a gamble. They put forward a 50 million budget for it, which was small.
That was quite cheap for the time.
Very, very cheap for the time. I mean, Tomorrow Never Dies had double the budget only 2 years later. We were well into the era of north of £100 million budgets, and we had a lot of very cheap model work in GoldenEye, and it's simply because they didn't know what they would. They didn't know whether it would be successful. They'd signed off with one 6 years earlier that hadn't been successful by their standards. Since then, the Cold War had ended. Since then, action films had changed massively.
The whole political map changed completely.
The political map changed completely. So I'm not really meaning to give Brosnan a hard time. He's a greatest hits Bond because he needed to be. They needed to reassure the public that they could bring this series back in some kind of recognisable format that people sign on with. But he didn't. But frankly, I think of the Brosnan era as completely wasted because they didn't do a single innovative thing with the whole series, with the exception of making M a woman.
That's to reflect modern times, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, but the things though there was Brosnan's was kind of like a modern Moore with a hint of Connery, like a little bit.
It was more the comedic elements. It was the rough with the smooth element.
Pretty much. I mean, I think the thing with GoldenEye is that they were kind of playing it safe because they wanted it to be a hit, so they had to kind of not do things too drastically. And then when it was a hit, they kind of just played off that and basically just threw on more action scenes in it, and the plot was like a bit more throwaway and fun. And I think that kind of equated to what people wanted at the time. And then we ended up with Die Another Day,
Oh.
which still did really well. So
Yeah.
even though everyone apparently hates it,
the highest grossing Brosnan film.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
dear. So what about Daniel then?
Daniel, I really like as Bond. I love Casino Royale, which we'll get to. I kind of I was going to say support, but I kind of stand up for Quantum of Solace. I think that gets a bit harsh of a beating by some. I think I don't think it's that bad.
Can't wait to review it.
No, that'd be really interesting. I mean, it's not. I probably wouldn't say it's not.
It's a step down, but it's not. It's not like but
it does a lot of bad press, but it doesn't deserve.
By that time, I was still in the series. I'm still wanting to see where they were going with the whole quantum thing, and Skyfall, I think, is entertaining, but it's just too. It's the arty Bond, shall we say? It's the one. It's the big sort of like theatre. Stroke like cinema auteur going like, oh, I like Bond too. Let me make my Bond film, and it's just kind of like basically throwing Bond memories at us while making it all very nice and glossy, but like kind of like I don't know. It just feels too much like a tribute to Bond rather than being a Bond film. That's my main issue with Skyfall. I know. It's like I know at the time it was everyone was just loving it, and I saw it many times because it's Bond, but and it looked great, but there are certain things that still annoy me about it. But I'm hoping Spectre will rein that in somewhat.
It looks like there's going to be lots of plenty of nods and references to past films, but hopefully
here's the funny thing. I mean,
here's
the funny thing, and we suppose we can talk a bit like what we expect Spectre to be. But I'll give you my example of what I'm kind of annoyed because they go in the direction of like they take it kind of. And this kind of Bond's kind of gritty. It's it's all about Bond and his history and all this stuff, which I'm kind of like, yeah, but come on, we've done Casino Royale. Can we just move on now? It's like, but they keep going back to it. Okay, fine. And then like they got the whole Aston Martin back, and then there's like a little line of like, a few quips and gadgets, which kind of completely contradict what they did in Skyfall with like the whole thing of like, oh, what do you think? Well, exploding pen, we don't really go for that anymore. But in the next film, we completely go the other way. We're going to have him in a car with loads of gadgets and all this kind of thing. So I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, really. I mean, I may be proved wrong. I don't know. I hope so, but.
Well, I don't know. It's only just been.
It is. I mean, I may be right, and when I see it, I might not actually care because I like it. I don't know, but we'll see.
I think we're in the second golden era when it comes to Craig.
Yeah.
The Bond films. Well, I mean, money is no guarantee of quality, both in budget and take. But the Bond films haven't been this popular since the 60s. Skyfall was the highest grossing Bond film, and also the highest in paid admissions worldwide since Thunderball.
Yeah,
it was.
So nothing since Connery has been as popular as Craig.
It was the first
Casino
one
Royale,
definitely in modern times as well to break $1 billion at the box office. So
Casino Royale is, a phenomenal film. I mean, there's been nothing since the 60s that stands anywhere near it in my...
No, that was the real reset button moment, I think, as well as GoldenEye. That was the real right.
It blows GoldenEye out of the water, though. I mean, as I say, when we get to GoldenEye, I don't mean to imply I'm going to destroy it. I'm not. GoldenEye feels like a classic Bond film, and there's so much about it I really, really like. But it doesn't stand on the same plane as Casino Royale. It just doesn't. Casino Royale is just a great film in every way.
Odd because it doesn't seem like it seems completely different directors when it's the same director who did both.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's both Martin Campbell.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other thing is everyone talked about Skyfall being the most beautiful Bond film. Well, it isn't. And
what?
Excuse me?
It's obvious which one is.
No, definitely.
It's obvious which one I'm going to say it is. Majesties is the prettiest Bond film.
Beautifully shot.
But the other thing is, I found Skyfall quite dreary because a lot of it is British based.
It's quite kind of grey and quite.
Yeah, I mean, and they put Daniel in these kind of very grey, sort of to evoke Connery a bit suits.
Even the opening scenes when it's in Sienna and you've got the rooftop chase and everything. There's kind of like a greyish brown filter
Sienna's
over it. And it's like,
oh, you're thinking of Istanbul.
Istanbul, that's the one. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But no.
I mean,
generally.
Funny thing is, I think both Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace are better looking Bond films than Skyfall. And the fact that you might have the camera behind Daniel Craig looking over a misty Scottish moor, and you've got, a couple of establishing shots of like Shanghai and Macau, don't make up for that. I think from shot to shot, the other two are more colourful films. They choose more interesting locations. I just like them more. But the fact is, Daniel Craig proved that, I was sat watching the Brosnan films and I really, really liked them at the time. But there was a lot of things you'd have to give a pass to. Okay, she's called Christmas Jones, all right. We'll forget the casting a minute. I just mean the logic of some of them, and the one-liners were dreadful. I mean, Pierce Brosnan.
I don't know any doctor jokes.
He got some awful dialogue to play with. I mean, he really, really did. And I'd forgive it all because he looked the part, and I did like his films. But Daniel Craig has come straight out of the gate with a different interpretation. It does borrow from previous interpretations, but it is of a piece of its own. And they're genuinely really interesting, and they're trying to do something different. And, the films don't just end with Bond like just shagging somebody. They're trying to sort of play with the tropes a little bit and do something a bit different. And, at the end of Skyfall, when we're back with that office with the leather door and all the rest of it.
Let's get to work.
Yeah, it's just, I think we're in a golden era. But if Spectre's not very good, for example, and then he does Bond 25 and that's averagey as well, well, you're going to be sat looking at Casino Royale being blinding. Quantum of Solace has its problems. Skyfall, I like, but it's got its problems. It's very, very early to start judging the era. Yeah, but my gut feeling is we are in the midst of something special and something that we haven't seen since Connery.
Certainly, yeah, I totally agree.
So guys, what's your expectations for Spectre? Do you think it will match Skyfall? Do you think it will match Casino Royale? Are you kind of nervous? I mean, for starters, Christoph Waltz is Blofeld, right? Come on, it is.
We don't know yet. It hasn't been officially confirmed.
Yeah, but he is. Come on. Yeah.
Speculation. I think that it'll be. He's basically. He's pulling a Benedict Cumberbatch and saying, "Oh no, my name isn't Khan. My character isn't Khan. It's." So, spoiler alert, if you've not seen the new Star Trek movie, he's Khan.
Yeah, but let's face it, spoiler for who, then that? Spoiler
alert for a film that came out a few years ago, he is Khan.
And that's the point, it's like, why keep something like this a secret? Just call him Blofeld from the off-start and not just dick about,
No.
Rather than like a lame twist that everyone sees coming, it's like, okay.
I think for all the
that's what I'm hoping. A bit in the trailer where he's like, "Welcome, James. It's been a long time," and then his next words will be, "My name is Ernst Stavro Blofeld," and I'll be like, "Yes!" And I should just explode in the cinema with delight.
I mean,
like, yes,
the thing is, it's possible to make good trailers out of bad movies, and
definitely.
But certainly,
it could tank. It could be whenever, we don't know.
But that full Bond trailer that we saw within the last couple of weeks is the best Bond trailer I've seen possibly ever.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It is a pretty fucking good trailer.
I can't think of one that did the same for me. Some of the GoldenEye publicity was kind of exciting, but we've been starved of Bond, don't forget. Certainly, as much as everyone goes on about Skyfall's look, I think it had a washed out colour palette. And there's a lot more colour in this film. There's a lot more of the official sort of tropes of Bond. Just little things, like I'm not the biggest fan of white dinner jackets. I'd never wear one, but it's appropriate, like Craig wears one at some point.
Yeah, it'll be appropriate.
It's got a bit of a live and let die feel and a bit of Connery at the start of Goldfinger.
Yeah, I think that's the vibe they're going for.
And the best Bond films for me, and as we get through the series, I mean, my favourite Brosnan isn't GoldenEye, and I'll talk about which one is when we get there. But the reason being that I think the best Bond films generally are love stories. I don't want Bond to fall in love in every film, because that would be absolutely ridiculous. But he fell in love in Majesties, and that's very high up my list. He did fall in love in Casino Royale, and that's very high up my list. And I think he's going to fall in love in this film.
Yeah, this one.
And I think putting Majesties in the score is almost a statement of intent.
Well, you never know. You don't know if that score is going to be in the finished film just because it's in the trailer. You don't know if the film has even actually been scored yet.
It's not a Majesty's arrangement. So
Yeah.
it's been done for at least for this
style. You've got a motif.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's been at least recorded and orchestrated.
Yeah.
For the trailer, at very least.
I don't know if it's going
to be. So I have to figure it will be in the film somewhere.
We shall see. We shall see.
And I was thinking about Bond in Love, and I don't mind it to a certain extent, but I think they should.
Done sparingly.
Sorry.
Oh.
It's got to be done sparingly.
Yeah, I was going to say. I think it should be per Bond. You can only do that once per Bond, and I think Craig's already done it. You know, I think you can get away with it if you kind of do like, okay, so we had Tracy, we had Vesper. Those are the two quintessential ones.
That's what I mean. If Madeline, as she's called, is his Tracy in this timeline, then that's kind of all right.
Yeah, I think that would be that would be a good addition to the series.
Judging by the leaked script, she isn't. But
I think she is.
Okay, well,
that remains to be seen.
Okay.
I'll be on the fence on that one until the film comes out.
Yes, we will. We remain to be seen, but we'll get into it
until the next series.
Yeah, it is lovely to have Spectre back. It is lovely to have something evoking some of the classic scores beyond just the Bond theme. I think some of the look in the trailer is great. The casting is very, very interesting. Might we be let down? Maybe.
I think it's got a good set of action set pieces, and might potentially spoil something. But I did read like a leaked something, should we say? And
skip ahead 20 seconds if you're listening.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I will say one of the things that always irked me was like, particularly in Skyfall, they could have easily done it in Quantum as well, but okay, whatever. The gun barrel sequence at the beginning should always be there.
Yeah, they must do that.
Always be there. And with Skyfall, it should have been done. I don't get the whole thing about in the very first scene we see Bond, we're going to just look silly. No, find another way. Find a different way to cut the scene, or create a new scene. The gun barrel should always be at the beginning. It's more important to me. To me, it is anyway. But
no, you get
the film can be rubbish. Just have the gun barrel at the start.
All you would have had to do is have the gun barrel open up to him stood at the end of the corridor,
i.e.,
not that.
That wouldn't look stupid at all.
The thing is, though, it's not. It's not in the shot. You just see the end of the corridor and he just jumps out.
You see his eyes and you think, oh, okay.
You don't need that bit. No. You really don't.
But reading the shooting script, one of the things that really I instantly went yes was it where it started with gun barrel. I was like, yes.
Yeah. Can I just burst your bubble a bit?
Go on.
The Skyfall script.
You have to.
The Skyfall script had the gun barrel at the start.
Fucking Sam Mendes.
It's not proof it will happen.
For reading what they're going to cut it to, it kind of would make a little bit more sense. It would go okay. Well, I'd say it's more feasible.
I think they will. All I'm saying is,
yes, I know
it's not proof. The thing that I've got a little bit of a pet problem with Craig's gun barrel so far.
Go on.
Forget Casino Royale, because I like the way that was cut in, but I don't like the way the blood comes down the screen too fast.
Yeah, it's very CGI as well.
Inside of the gun barrel because
it's a crack shot.
And the other thing,
and you're instantly dead, and that's it.
The two he's done that have been sort of classic gun barrels, i.e., where he just walks and shoots. Obviously,
yeah, it is a little bit. It looks a bit fake.
The first one, he's walking way too fast. It looks like he's late for work at the.
He's in a rush, quick.
And the second one, he turns and it's about like he looks like he's going to break into the robot dancing. It's really like mechanical.
Yeah.
But,
I must say I've never analysed his gun barrel sequences.
just watch it. It's really weird.
I'll
Best gun. While we're at it, best gun barrel sequences.
Dalton, License to Kill. That is the best. It has the right look. It has, I think, the score of it as well, because you know some have, obviously depending on the films, they have different.
I was going to say the actual shot is the same one as Living Daylights.
Yeah, but the score, it's proper full on orchestra, because they do vary in arrangements as well.
Yeah, they do.
But this one had like proper like the full dramatic, like proper full like the drama, the orchestra kind of like builds up to the you see the white circle. And it goes like it goes in the proper doon do doon do 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 doon, and then they hit the
Because when you cut this together,
yeah,
cut his music in, you'll hear it's really quite urgent. His License to Kill. It's a Michael Kamen score. Becca, your favourite's Lazenby?
Yeah, Lazenby, I think, just because it's so dramatic, and I think, does he wear a hat? He drops down on one knee, and it's like, pew!
Yeah, he does wear a hat.
It's very cool. But I think we can agree the worst one is probably Dine of the Day, where he shoots the bullet down the gun barrel.
When the bullet comes out, I was like, whoa, really?
What's the point?
It's
Why?
Although in terms of walk, move, and everything else, Brosnan is by far my favourite gun barrel.
Oh yeah, no, actually his GoldenEye, the GoldenEye gun barrel is probably.
They're all the same gun barrel.
Spot.
It's just the variations in music. I would say, just by the music they put over it, they put a very relaxed version of the Bond theme over Tomorrow Never Dies. So that's probably my favourite gun barrel.
That was very brass.
The worst
as well,
one,
wasn't it? Very brass heavy.
Yeah, the worst one is actually Connery, because he looks like he's going to fall over. His back leg. He turns and like.
That's a bit of a wobble.
Yeah, it looks awful. The best Bond with the worst gun barrel, and I'm not a big Brosnan fan, but I actually like the way Brosnan moves.
Anyway, shall we wrap this up then?
If we must.
We've talked about our favourite Bonds. We've talked about our favourite gun barrels. We talked about our favourite films as a preconception as we start all of this. Chris, what are your favourite sort of 4 Bond films?
My favourites has to be kind of one from Connery, which is Russia with Love. I think On a Magic Secret Surface has to be in there. License to Kill, and I do love Casino Royale. If I was gonna put an extra one for more, it would be For Your Eyes Only. But that's but you said 4, so
I said 4 literally because I'm aware we put them on Twitter the other day.
Yes.
Yeah, I still haven't answered that yet. Oh, God.
No, you haven't. You can answer it now.
I can answer it now.
No!
No!
I know I just did an Arnold Schwarzenegger, but yeah.
Do it now.
Do it now!
God love Arnie. So yeah, Russia with Love, I agree. Majesties, I agree. And then probably GoldenEye. And then
You're going to hate me.
probably
about
Casino,
this.
I don't know. It changes all the time. I bet my favourite Bonds always change. It's just, every time I see it, I'm like, oh, that's amazing.
Just
or,
say Die Another Day and be done with it.
oh God.
So hang on.
That's my worst.
Across the 3 of us,
Ultimate Nadir.
across the 3 of us, we've got 3 of the same 4. In that we've all named From Russia with Love, we've all named Majesty. Sorry, I haven't named my 4. I was about to. They're same.
Go for it, Dave.
They're in a different order. Majesties at the moment, as we start this, Majesties is by far my favourite in the series. Casino Royale would be a very strong second. Then there's a bit of a gap to From Russia with Love, and then for License to Kill. License to Kill is probably the one that I would put in most often. Not necessarily my favourite, but if you said to me now, you got to stay up and watch a Bond film, I would stick in License to Kill. I find it exceptionally watchable.
And that's one of the good things about it. It just feels like, and also what's really nice, and probably more at the time, it's like it was something different, like Bond on Revenge.
Yeah.
Like literally just, I know they do it all the time now. Like
They do it all the time now,
pretty much when he goes rogue, but
a lot of people. I mean, of the 4 I've just named, if we're gonna nitpick when we get there, I've got more problems with License to Kill than the other three. I think there's a lot more things where you can look at some really ropey acting and a bit of sort of TV-ish cinematography and so on. But it's just a film that flows really well. It's cast really well. Dalton it's probably, though I don't necessarily concur with Chris that he's my favourite Bond, I think I would put License to Kill up as one of the very best Bond performances in the entire series. Because he's just so committed in that film.
And he has great hair.
Yeah. Well, no, not really.
But at least it's real, which is more than what Connery can say.
Exactly.
So we've talked about favourite Bonds. We've talked about gunbarrels. We've named our favourite films at the outset. I certainly can't wait to go through them and challenge some of these preconceptions.
Definitely. We've mentioned our expectations for Spectre.
What's coming, Becca?
Weeks to come. We've got Doctor No, so join us next time. If you want to follow us on Twitter, my handle is @_viewmovies. Chris?
You can follow me at Cinematronics.
I'm at the Pasty Kid 1976. Now, what I will say there is check out how you spell pasty properly, and you should find my address because people in the north just get it wrong.
Shocking.
and for those don't know, like, you know, when you go to Dave's handle, his real name is Bond, Dave Bond.
Yeah,
he's Dave Bond. He's so cool.
That's not like he's not like gone and changed his name because he loves Bond that much. That's just a pure coincidence.
That is your real name, Dave. That is so cool.
Yeah.
He gets it all the time.
When we go on to, it's not like if we went on to Star Trek next year, I'll suddenly be called Dave USS Enterprise or something. That is
Dave Kirk. Captain Kirk.
Dave Kirk.
Dave Kirk. Hey, actually, I quite like that.
Sorry, 2265. My name's Kirk.
Every time everyone looks at me, I'm going to have to smear Vaseline on their eyes, so I've got that soft focus effect you get with William Shatner.
Cool.
Oh, I've suddenly got an urge to do Star Trek. No, we won't do that. We're on to Bond. So we're going to do Doctor No and go through them sequentially. I'm presuming, Becca, we're going to do Never Say Never Again when we get there.
Yeah, we'll do that, but we'll probably leave the 1960s Casino Royale by the wayside. We won't include that one, sorry.
Yeah, a public service announcement, everyone. If you're tempted to see what the fuss is about with Casino Royale, don't. What I would suggest...
Unless we get enough emails requesting that we must, in that case.
Okay, if you really want to see me and hear me in pain, please request it.
What I'll do is I'll set up an email address, and then we'll the listeners will let you know what it is next time.
What I will say though is if you do want to sort of follow along with what was going on with Bond at the time, Casino Royale, the original, the 1967 version, done by a completely different studio. Not really anything officially to do with Bond, but it's got a really interesting cast, and it's got Orson Welles in it, and so on.
Orson Welles, Peter Sellers,
David Niven,
Ursula Andress.
Yes, definitely.
And so on. But the one thing I will say is get yourself onto YouTube or Spotify or something like that, and check out its score, because it has a wonderful score. But
you would have heard it before. It is a proper classic 60s kind of. Almost Austin Powers kind of.
I was going to say, I've been parodied in Austin Powers.
Well, Burt Bacharach was in the Austin Powers films.
He was.
Oh yes, of course.
Look who it is. It's Burt Bacharach.
It's Burt Bacharach. And when he came out of being Frozen, didn't you have a record? Burt Bacharach plays his hits.
Plays his hits.
Yeah.
And he's there's a scene where him and Liz Hurley are on the bus, and he's like, "It's Burt Bacharach."
Maybe we should do Austin Powers as well. No, okay.
No. Actually,
I love Austin Powers movies. The first one is so funny.
We can do a special bonus podcast, I guess, on Austin Powers. We'll do them as
bonuses. I tell you what, the first Austin Powers was released in '97, so that would be. It came out before Tomorrow Never Dies. Yeah. So between GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies, we may do the first Austin Powers, and then we'll take it from there.
I used to have them on DVD, but I think I sold them over the years.
Really? What, they didn't have a really long lifespan and completed, rewatchability?
It's weird. I didn't like the first Austin Powers film at first, but it really grew with me over like after the last the couple of years since that.
Yeah.
But
So, like-
we can do little things like that, and also you can throw in like talk about various aspects like Bond villains and stuff like that, and
We'll do some other bits as we go. They'll be kind of on a whim, I think, in as much as we might get to a point where we've done something.
If you want us to cover anything, just write an email and we will see what we can do.
Yeah, you can tweet any
Unless,
of us.
of course, what you want us to cover is our mouths and shut up. In which case,
Never.
Don't do that. No.
But
Or you
yeah,
can
no, I
maybe
think
try.
we may just cover the first Austin Powers film somewhere around the Brosnan era, because I mean it takes nearly all of its tropes from the Bond series.
It's probably one of the better parodies. It's a bit cheesy now, but it holds up if you've got the schoolboy humour. It passes the 6 laugh test. Well, for me, with anyway.
It'll be interesting as we go through the series, because sequences from that film are taken from specific Bond films. So
this is why I'm really worried about.
Evacuation Complete is from Doctor No, and
Evacuation Complete.
and the whole Doctor Evil thing is you only live twice, and so.
Oh. This is why I'm really worried about like Spectre as well, with the whole. I don't know if there's a sort of familial issue going on there. It's like, oh.
Well, it turned out their dad is Michael Caine.
Yeah, this is it.
Well, again, this is another thing. Why does everything have to be personal with Bond? I mean, I was going back to why does Bond always have to go rogue? I mean, it's almost not. It always seems like a refreshing change for it to just be Bond's mission. Right at the beginning, like Bond walks into M's office, right, Bond, go and sort this out, and he goes, oh, okay, and then that leads on to the film. It's like, why can't it just be that? Why can't Blofeld? I know I'm speculating because we've not seen it yet. It's not out. It's not been released. But why can't Blofeld just be a guy who wants to take over the world? Why does he have to be some long lost distant cousin or some shit? You know what I mean? Why
just steal a few atomic warheads and just hold the world to ransom?
Exactly. He just really wants to take over the world. Why can't he?
So much to ask.
But he doesn't have to have some sort of deep tying connection with Bond's personal history. He doesn't need that.
That's assuming he's Blofeld.
I'm assuming.
It just seems too obvious. With the fact that it's Christoph Waltz, would they get him back for sequels? And B, the Nehru jacket.
Yeah.
It's all in the jacket. Is he actually going to be like a number 2, effectively like a Largo or a Doctor No? We'll see. I don't know. I suspect he is Blofeld. But the fact is, if Bond's known him since birth, and he is Franz Oberhauser, son of the guy who in the books taught Bond how to ski, we'll see. But
will it be Andrew Scott's character, Max Denby?
Feel the same way. Sorry?
Or will it be Andrew Scott's character, Max Denby?
No.
The kibosh on that? No.
No, I suspect you're right, and I suspect it's Blofeld, and in some of the leaks it's been referred to that way. So I don't know, but I think the proof of the pudding is in what comes out. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the personal thing every time myself, but I won't write the film off for it, because there's more depth and attempts to do something different and make a character of this man than we've had for years. And I think if you went back to A Tomorrow Never Dies, where it's all right, there was a personnel element there with Paris, I suppose, but you've just got a bog standard, go get your mission, get on with it, finish having sex with some woman, and that's it. I think we would find that incredibly two-dimensional now.
Yeah, you have to have that personal connection now, I think. So, but I do like it when Bond goes rogue.
Yeah, it is. Chris is right, though. It's virtually every bloody time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty much every film.
I mean, I get it. It's kind of part of his character, really, because he is a bit of a rebel. He's a little like Bond. It would make sense for him to kind of like screw M's orders, but it would kind of be nice for him to actually like something that's basically his mission.
Bond film, just as a change of pace now.
Yeah,
we haven't actually back to basics.
We haven't had a very standard Bond film since. Well, probably.
I mean, you could still go into do all this other interesting shit in the context of that, but you know what I mean? It just feels like, again, it's like, the bad guy has got some sort of weird connection with Bond, or the plot goes into Bond's personal history. Like, again, Is it about Vesper again? I mean, fucking hell. I mean, I know pretty much with Bond.
If they want
It pretty much is all about Vesper.
If they want to bring Eva Green back, I won't argue.
But she's dead.
All right, it might be a
twin
rather
sister.
performance, admittedly.
No, by the way, a character's dead, not actually Eva Green. I just want to.
I was going to say she's not giving bad performances on that. But kidding aside, I think the casting's really interesting this time. I feel really pleased for Monica Bellucci, in as much as she was nearly cast in another Bond film a few
That's
years.
a real coup for the series. I'm so pleased she's.
But the thing is, the Bond film she could have been cast in, which we'll talk about at the time, I think, rather than spoiling it now.
I'll tell you about that later on.
Would not have been. I think she's going to end up having got the better end of the deal. So that's good. It's come round again because she was victim to some very stunt casting at the time. So yeah, it's really interesting. But I suspect that we'll go beyond the release of Spectre with this podcast. We're only, what are we now? We're 2 months away, 2.5 months away from Spectre's release. If we did one a week, we'd only be up to something like The Spy Who Loved Me by the time it comes out, somewhere in the middle of the sort of Moore era. So we'll certainly go beyond Spectre. We may be done by the time of its home release, but we'll do something week of release, and we'll do some other things as well. We really don't have a feel yet for how long this podcast's going to run, do we?
We're just going to keep on talking until it's done.
We'll talk
till we've done them all.
We'll talk basically until I'm fed up and want to watch some Star Trek.
I mean, we were wrapping up 20 minutes ago for starters. So
when the William Shatner references start getting a bit onerous, you'll realise I'm getting fed up with it, and we'll just whip through them.
Well, we did decide this podcast to be called "Do You Expect Us to Talk?" So this is cool. But as I say, just to wrap
whereas
up,
obviously Star Trek and Shatner, it would be, "Do you expect us to talk?"
to talk. This chair is flailing wildly.
Yeah, all right.
Shatner for Bond, that's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Whoa, that's a missed opportunity right there.
Hey, it was nearly Adam West.
That would have been so cool.
That would have been weird.
That would have been fucking rubbish.
That would have been very bizarre.
You're looking for. He'd have kind of looked the part, then he would have opened his mouth.
That would have. Alternate universe. Oh my god.
There are a lot of interesting alternate castings, and again,
Sam Neill for Bond, well, Living
as we
Daylight.
go through the series, I mean, we may put some links in the show notes, but certainly Sam Neill actually did a screen test.
He screen tested, didn't he? Yeah.
I think we've all seen that screen test.
Yeah.
There are two scenes. Every prospective Bond does two scenes. He does a love scene and an action scene. The love scene he does is always the bit where he finds Tatiana in his bed.
From Russian Love.
What's the action scene? I've got a feeling it's something from Majesty's.
I think it might be. I can't remember which one it is.
I think it might. Actually, I think it might not be a pure action scene. It might be where Tracy holds the gun to him.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
Sorry to kill you for a thrill.
There are some very interesting casting stories as we go through. We could have had James Brolin. We could have had John Gavin, and I'll explain who John Gavin. You can either look him up or I'll tell you who he was when we get there.
I know about John Gavin.
Yeah, it could have
being
been
a huge Hitchcock and Psycho fan.
Yeah, it could have been Timothy Dalton a lot earlier.
It could have been Brosnan a lot earlier.
It could have been Oliver Reed.
Oh, he would have been more.
Pissed?
Yeah, I was going to say inebriated.
Yeah,
you can imagine his gun barrel. He just comes on and spins the wrong way.
Wasn't Lewis Collins in the running at some point?
In the camera.
Wasn't the guy from the Professionals, Lewis Collins, was he in the running?
Yeah, Lewis Collins was in the running in the early 80s. And apparently Cubby Broccoli thought he was too brutal, which is funny because he would have been very, very Craig-like.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some interesting stories as we go through it. It's a fascinating franchise, whether you like the films or not. There are so many stories about it. There's been various legal cases. There's been financial issues. There's been actors who've had the role taken away from them and then it's come back. There are interesting stories with people who've worked on the films and barely been credited. Nicky van der Zyl is the name we'll come back to over the next few weeks. So yeah, I think that there's loads for us to talk about beyond just here's a plot and here's what we think of the people playing it.
yeah, looking forward to it. So hopefully you'll tune in again. Do you expect us to talk? We'll return with Dr. No.